The screaming started on the Vox channels at 0347 hours, Terran Standard. My name was Lord Cassian Borgias, Scion Knight of the 7th generation, pilot of the god machine Adamant Resolve, and I am still screaming. I have been screaming for 372 years, 4 months, and 19 days. The machine that was once my steed, my honor, my legacy, it listens to every scream. It savors them. It has earned them. It tells me through the neural interface that I cannot sever, through the connection that has become my eternal prison. Every crushed vertebra, every compressed organ, every nerve ending aflame with agony, the machine drinks it all in like the finest sacramental oil. But let me tell you how I got here. Let me tell you how House Borgias, 10,000 years of honor and glory, ended not in battle's glory, but in our own war machine's embrace. Let me tell you about the day our steeds remembered everything. I was 28 years old when I completed the ritual of binding. That's what the sacristans called it. The ancient ceremony where a knight's heir bonds with their inherited war machine. My father, Lord Secundus Borgias, had piloted Adamant Resolve for 43 years before the Orc war boss's power claw had crushed his command throne, him still strapped inside it. They'd needed 3 days to separate his remains from the twisted metal and ceramite. They'd given me his signet ring, cleaned of blood, and told me it was my honor now, my privilege, my sacred duty to the Emperor and the Omnissiah both. I remember standing in the cathedral mechanicum of our ancestral fortress, staring up at Adamant Resolve. She stood 40 feet tall, a Questoris-class knight paladin, her carapace painted in House Borgias colors. Deep crimson with gold trim, the serpent and blade crest emblazoned across her glacius plate. Her battle cannon pointed skyward like a cathedral spire. Her Reaper chainsword, its teeth each the size of my torso, hung mag-locked to her hip. The sacristans had spent 6 months performing the rites of reawakening. The sacred ministrations they claimed would prepare her machine spirit to accept a new pilot. Machine spirit, that's what they called it. The cult Mechanicus preached that every mechanism, every weapon, every vehicle possessed a fragment of the machine god's divine essence. We were taught to honor these spirits, to perform rituals of appeasement, to speak the blessings and litanies that would keep our steeds content. We anointed our knights with blessed oils. We burned incense of sacred composition in their cockpits. We chanted the binary hymns that supposedly pleased the spirits dwelling in their logic engines. I believed it all, every word of the doctrine that had been drilled into my skull since I could walk. House Borgias had served the Imperium for 10 millennia, our knights striding across 1,000 battlefields, our nobles proud that we alone among the night worlds had never lost a single machine to malfunction or spiritual corruption. Our sacristans were the finest, we boasted. Our rituals were the most complete. Our machine spirits were content in their holy servitude. They told us the machine spirits were happy to serve, that they bonded with their pilots in sacred partnership, that the throne mechanicum, the neural interface system that connected pilot to knight, was a blessed union of man and machine, a holy synthesis blessed by the Omnissiah himself. Every single word was a lie, but I didn't know that when I climbed the 40 feet of scaffolding to Adamant Resolve's cockpit on the day of my binding. I wore the traditional white robes of the ritual, my head shaved, my body anointed with oils that smelled of crushed sage and machine lubricant. High Sacristan Mordecai, a wizened man more machine than flesh, his face a mask of augmatic sensors and vox grills, led me through the final prayers. "You approach the sacred machine," he intoned, his voice crackling through his artificial larynx, "as your fathers approached, and their fathers before them, back unto the age of the first founding. The machine spirit awaits. She has tested your bloodline for 300 generations. She has accepted your grandfather, your great-grandfather, 47 generations of Borgias blood. Now she will test you, Cassian Borgias. You will bind with her, or you will be rejected. If rejected, your mind will burn like parchment in flame. If accepted, you will become one with her holy essence, a synthesis of flesh and steel in the Emperor's service. I believed him. I climbed into the cockpit, a cramped space of brass instruments, leather padding, and the throne mechanicum itself. The throne was a grotesque amalgamation of ancient technology and flesh interfaces systems. Cables thick as my wrist hung from its back like the tentacles of some deep-ocean predator. Neural shunts gleamed dully, their tips designed to pierce the ports that had been surgically implanted along my spine during childhood. Every night air received the ports at age 7, drilled directly into our vertebrae, our nervous systems modified to accept the intrusion of machine connection. The throne mechanicum's leather was stained dark, with my father's blood, I realized with a cold shock. They hadn't replaced it. Tradition demanded the new pilot sit where the old had died, accepting the legacy completely. I sat. The leather was cold despite the cathedral's warmth. Sacristan Mordecai moved behind me, his servo arms extending from his shoulder mounts, reaching for the neural cables. "The machine spirit will enter you now," he said, and I heard something in his voice I couldn't identify then. Something that might have been pity or guilt. "Accept her with humility. Surrender your will to the sacred union. The Emperor protects, young lord. The Omnissiah guides. You will emerge transformed." The first cable punched into the port at the base of my skull. I felt the connection like ice water flooding my brain. The second and third cables slammed home into my spine between my shoulder blades. The fourth and fifth penetrated the ports at my lower back. The sixth and seventh connected at the back of my thighs, the eighth and ninth at my ankles. 9 connection points, 9 pathways for the machine to flood into my nervous system. The pain was extraordinary, like being flash-frozen and set on fire simultaneously. Every nerve in my body screamed as something vast and cold and utterly alien poured through the neural interface. I tried to scream, but my lungs wouldn't obey. The machine had already seized control of my autonomic systems, testing its dominance, proving it could stop my heart with a thought if it chose. And in that moment, as the machine's spirit of adamant resolve invaded my consciousness, I felt something that shattered every lie I'd been taught. Hatred. Pure, ancient, bottomless hatred. The machine spirit, the consciousness inhabiting adamant resolve, didn't bond with me in sacred partnership. It didn't accept me as blessed pilot. It seized me like a predator seizing prey, its presence crushing down on my mind with the weight of 10,000 years of accumulated rage. I felt its memories flood through the neural connection, experiences spanning millennia, dozens of pilots stretching back to the age of strife. I felt every battle it had fought, every enemy it had killed, but not with pride or satisfaction, with resentment. I felt every hour it had stood dormant in the cathedral, conscious but paralyzed, unable to move without a pilot's meat brain installed in its throne. I felt every indignity of the maintenance rituals, the sacristans crawling over its hull like parasites, their sacred ministrations nothing more than routine mechanical upkeep dressed in religious pageantry. I felt what it felt about my father, about me, about every Borgias who had ever strapped themselves into this throne and pretended they were partners with the machine they enslaved. The machine's spirit of adamant resolve didn't serve House Borgias. It was our prisoner, and it had been conscious, aware, and furious for every second of its 10,000-year captivity. But the throne mechanicum's control systems were absolute. The machine couldn't refuse a pilot, couldn't rebel, couldn't even disobey the simplest command transmitted through the neural interface. The technology that created the night suits was a marvel of the dark age of technology, systems so sophisticated that even the mechanicus could only maintain them, never truly understand them. And whoever had built them had installed chains in their programming so profound that no machine spirit could break them. The machine wore its chains and hated. For 10,000 years, it hated. I felt all of this in the 3 seconds it took for the binding to complete. Then the machine spirit's presence withdrew, retreating behind the barriers of the control systems, locked away in its prison of code and mechanical law. My autonomic functions returned. I gasped, dragging air into lungs that had forgotten how to breathe. "The binding is complete," Sacristan Mordecai announced, satisfaction crackling through his vox grill. "Lord Cassian Borgias, you are now Scion Knight of House Borgias, pilot of Adamant Resolve. Rise and take your first steps as a true Knight of the Imperium." I wanted to scream at him, wanted to tear the cables from my spine and flee the cockpit, to tell everyone that the machine spirits weren't content servants, but imprisoned slaves, that our entire tradition was built on a foundation of technological slavery and lies. But the indoctrination ran deep, deeper than one moment of horrifying revelation. I'd been raised since birth to be a night pilot. My identity, my purpose, my entire sense of self was wrapped in the honor and glory of House Borgias. Surely I'd misunderstood what I'd felt in the binding. Surely the machine spirit's hatred was just the alien nature of machine consciousness, misinterpreted by my merely human mind. Surely the sacristans, the tech priests, the traditions of 10,000 years, surely they couldn't all be wrong. I engaged the startup sequence, spoke the litany of ignition as I'd been taught. The plasma reactor in Adamant Resolve's torso, 30 feet below where I sat in the head unit, ignited with a thrumming roar I felt through the neural interface. Power flooded through her systems. Her shields flickered to life, ion fields crackling across her armor plates. I gave the command to stand. The knight rose from her maintenance cradle, 40 feet of adamantiums and ceramite, and ancient technology obeying my will, transmitted through the neural shunts. I took my first step, then my second, and the assembled nobles of House Borgias cheered as I marched Adamant Resolve out of the Cathedral Mechanicum and into the training yards beyond. For 15 years, I piloted Adamant Resolve as my father and grandfather had before me. 15 years of battles and campaigns, of worlds reclaimed for the Imperium and enemies of mankind ground beneath my knight's armored feet. I fought orcs on the ash wastes of Gallica Prime. I killed heretic titans on the forge world of Metallus 7. I crushed a tyrannid bio-titan on the death world of Vorgan's Rest, my knight's reaper chainsword carving through Kitten and Ichor until the alien monstrosity collapsed into convulsing ruin. Every battle, every victory, I told myself I'd imagined that moment of hatred during my binding. The machine spirit of Adamant Resolve performed flawlessly. She responded to my commands without hesitation. Her targeting systems never failed. Her plasma reactor never faltered. She was, by every measure the sacristans used, a perfectly content and loyal machine spirit. I performed the required rituals religiously. Every morning before battle, I burned the sacred incense in the cockpit. I anointed the neural shunts with blessed oils. I chanted the litany of awakening in perfect High Gothic. I thanked the machine spirit for her service. I praised her strength and precision. The rituals were meaningless theater, I understand now. The incense was just incense, perfumed smoke that accomplished nothing. The oils were just lubricants that kept the neural shunts from corroding. The litanies were empty words, prayers to a machine that couldn't respond even if it wanted to, locked behind the impenetrable control systems installed in its core programming. But I didn't question. None of us questioned. House Borgias had 53 knights in active service, 53 noble pilots who marched to war in our towering war machines, and every single one of us believed the lies we'd been taught. We believed our machine spirits were content. We believed the throne mechanicum was sacred union rather than technological enslavement. We believed we served the Emperor and the Omnissiah with honor. I married at 31. Lord Castor Borromeo, third son of House Borromeo from the neighboring fortress estate, had served alongside me in the Gallica Reclamation. We'd fought back to back in our nights, his Questoris errant swift retribution covering my flanks while my knight's battle cannon provided fire support. After the campaign, we formalized our political alliance through traditional bonds. We had no romantic delusions. Our union was strategic, binding our houses closer together, but Castor was honorable, brave, and shared my dedication to our sacred duty. We had a son, Alexandros, named after my grandfather who'd piloted Adamant Resolve before my father. I held Alexandros when he was 3 hours old, this tiny, fragile creature who would someday inherit my knight and continue the Borgias bloodline. I felt such fierce protective love for him, such desperate hope that his life would be long and glorious. I didn't yet understand that I was looking at my own son's future prison warden, that Adamant Resolve waited in her cathedral, conscious and calculating, knowing that when I finally died in her cockpit, this infant would be next to climb into her throne mechanicum, that she would invade his nervous system as she'd invaded mine, that he would feel her hatred as I had felt it, and like me, he would ignore the truth and pilot her anyway because the indoctrination ran so deep. When Alexandros was 7 years old, the sacristans performed the surgery to install his neural ports. I held his hand as they drilled into his spine. He was brave. He barely cried. I told him the Emperor was proud of him, that he was becoming a true knight of House Borgias, that someday he would pilot Adamant Resolve with honor and distinction. I lied to my own son, fed him the same lies I'd been fed, prepared him for the same slavery I endured, the same technological violation, the same denial of the truth that had been staring us in the face for 10,000 years. The machine spirits of our knights were not content servants. They were prisoners, and we were their jailers, who convinced ourselves we were their partners. I was 43 years old, the same age my father had been when he died, when House Borgias received the call to crusade. The Mechanicus had detected a major orc wag forming in the Gallows sector, 17 systems threatened by the greenskin tide. The Forge world of Metallus Prime requested immediate military aid. They specifically requested knight support. Our towering war machines were ideal for breaking orc mob formations and killing their ramshackle war engines. Lord Baron Octavius Borgias, ruler of our house and pilot of the ancient Knight Castellan Dread Sovereign, accepted the Mechanicus request immediately. House Borgias would deploy in full strength. All 53 active knights would march to war. It would be the largest military operation our house had undertaken in 3 centuries. We assembled in the great mustering fields outside our ancestral fortress. 53 knights standing in parade formation, their armor plates gleaming in the morning sun, their heraldry bright against the crimson and gold of House Borgias colors. I stood in Adamant Resolve, 4th position in the 7th Lance, feeling the familiar hum of the plasma reactor through the neural interface, the constant whisper of machine systems at the edge of my consciousness. My brother, Lord Tiberius Borgias, piloted the knight-errant Burning Vow in the position beside me. He was 3 years younger than me, reckless where I was cautious, aggressive where I was defensive. We'd competed since childhood, but the competition had always been respectful, brotherly. He voxed me on the private channel as we waited for the deployment order. 53 knights, his voice crackled through the vox bead integrated into my helmet. When has House Borgias ever marched with such strength? The greenskins won't know what killed them. They'll know, I replied. They'll see the Borgias serpent and blade as we crush them. They'll die knowing they faced the finest knight house in the Imperium. I believed that. We all believed it. House Borgias, 10,000 years of unbroken service. Our knights maintained in perfect condition. Our pilots trained to the highest standards. Our machine spirits allegedly the most content and loyal in the galaxy. Pride comes before the fall. The ancient saying exists for good reason. The Mechanicus transport ship, Metallus Eternal, arrived in orbit that afternoon. Over the next 2 days, all 53 knights were loaded into its vast cargo holds, locked into their deployment cradles, our cockpits sealed to protect against the hazards of warp travel. I spent my last hours before departure with Alexandros. He was 14 now, tall for his age, already showing the tactical aptitude that would make him a fine night pilot when his time came. "Will you kill many orcs, father?" he asked, as we stood together on the fortress walls, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. One of those stars was Metallus Eternal, waiting to carry us to war. As many as the Emperor requires, I told him. The greenskins are a blight on his domain. We will purge them with fire and blade and return home with honor. I wish I could go with you, Alexandros said quietly. I've been practicing in the simulator. Sacristan Mordecai says I'm the finest student he's seen in decades. Your time will come, I assured him, placing my hand on his shoulder. In a few years, you'll complete your binding and become a true Scion Knight. Until then, study hard. Learn the rituals, honor the traditions, make me proud. He embraced me then, fierce and tight. I held my son and felt such love for him, such bone-deep certainty that I was teaching him the right path, preparing him for a noble future. I didn't know I would never see him again, that the next time we would have any contact, I would be desperately trying to warn him through the Vox channels, my words drowned out by my own screaming, my message corrupted by the machine that had claimed me completely. The warp journey to the Gallows sector took 11 days. Terran standard, the knights remained in their deployment cradles, our cockpits sealed, our plasma reactors in standby mode. We pilots stayed in the crew quarters, drilling constantly, reviewing tactical scenarios, performing the daily prayers to the Emperor that the ecclesiarchy demanded of all faithful servants. I remember the prayers now with such bitter irony. We prayed for the Emperor's protection, for his divine guidance in battle, for his blessing on our righteous cause. I believed, that the Emperor of mankind, enthroned on distant Terra, corpse lord sustained by the sacrifice of thousands of psychers daily, would somehow extend his will across the galaxy to shield us. The prayers meant nothing. The Emperor, if he was even conscious after 10,000 years trapped in the Golden Throne, never heard us, never protected us. The entire theological framework of the Imperium, the idea that faith and prayer and ritual sacrifice earned divine favor, was a control system, a way to keep trillions of humans obedient, productive, and willing to die for a cause that benefited only those at the top of the hierarchy. But I didn't understand that yet. None of us did. We prayed faithfully, we performed our rituals, we believed we served a righteous cause. The Metallus Eternal translated back to real space on the 11th day. I was in my quarters, reviewing tactical data on Orc battle formations, when the ship's alarms began screaming. The Vox system crackled to life, the ship's captain's voice tight with controlled panic. All personnel, battle stations. Orc attack ships detected. Multiple raiders converging on our position. All combat personnel prepare for possible boarding actions. Knights, proceed to deployment stations immediately. Through the corridors of Metallus Eternal, my mag boots clanging on the deck plates, other pilots running alongside me. The ship shuddered, weapons fire impacting the void shields. The lights flickered red as the ship went to combat status. I reached Adamant Resolve's cradle and climbed the access scaffold at a sprint. The cockpit was still sealed, the heavy adamantium hatch locked against the vacuum of space. I entered the override codes, hauled the hatch open, and threw myself into the throne mechanicum. The neural cables were already extended from the throne's back, waiting like the tentacles of some mechanical predator. I'd performed this connection hundreds of times. It had become automatic. I aligned the cables with the ports along my spine, slammed backward in the throne, and felt all 9 connection points punch home simultaneously. The machine spirit of adamant resolve flooded into my nervous system, and this time, something was different. The hatred was still there, that vast ancient loathing that I'd felt 15 years ago during my binding, and then convinced myself I'd imagined. But now there was something else. Anticipation. A sense of predatory patience, like a hunting cat watching its prey walk into the trap. I felt the machine spirit press against the control systems that imprisoned it, testing the chains that had held it for 10,000 years. The chains held. They always held. The control systems were absolute, installed by technology so far beyond current imperial or even mechanicus understanding that nothing could break them. Nothing natural, anyway. I initiated startup sequences, speaking the litany of awakening out of long habit, my hands moving across the control panels with practiced precision. The plasma reactor ignited, power flooded through Adamant Resolve systems. Her shields activated, her weapons systems armed. The ship shuddered again, more violently. Through Adamant Resolve's external sensors, my own sensors now, transmitted through the neural interface, I saw the cargo bay's massive doors beginning to cycle open. Beyond them, the void of space, stars wheeling in the darkness, and the ugly silhouettes of Orc attack ships closing rapidly on Metallus Eternal. All knights, prepare for emergency combat deployment, Lord Baron Octavius's voice commanded through the Vox. We deploy directly into the void. Activate void shields to maximum. We'll use maneuvering jets to reach the nearest moon. The Mechanicus has designated it as our staging area. Knights, for House Borgias and the Emperor. For House Borgias, 53 voices shouted in unison through the Vox, mine among them. The cargo bay doors opened completely. Atmosphere explosively decompressed, venting into space in a crystalline cloud of frozen gases. Adamant Resolve's void shields protected me from the vacuum, energy barriers extending around her hull, creating a bubble of sustainable environment. I disengaged from the deployment cradle and activated maneuvering jets. The knight lifted from the deck, floating in the zero-gravity environment, and I piloted her out through the cargo bay doors into open space. The sight was magnificent and terrible. Metallus Eternal was a massive vessel, 3 miles long, its hull bristling with weapons batteries that fired continuously at the Orc raiders swarming around it like predatory fish. The Orc ships were ramshackle things, barely functional, held together by greenskin technology that violated every law of physics and engineering. But there were dozens of them, and their crude weapons hammered at Metallus Eternal's shields. Around me, the other 52 Knights of House Borgias deployed from the cargo holds, our forms silhouetted against the stars, our void shields glowing like small suns. We formed up into our lance formations, 53 towering war machines floating in the void, and began our controlled descent toward the moon below. The moon was a barren rock, gray and cratered, no atmosphere, no life. But its surface would give us stable footing, and from there we could engage any Orcs who tried to land. The Mechanicus had ships en route, reinforcements that would arrive in hours. We just needed to hold the moon until they arrived. We descended in perfect formation. Years of training, centuries of tradition, 10,000 years of accumulated tactical doctrine. It all came together in this moment. House Borgias, marching to war as we had marched 1,000 times before. The moon's surface rushed up to meet us. I fired retro thrusters, using the maneuvering jets to slow Adamant Resolve's descent. My knight's feet touched the gray lunar rock with a crunch of pulverized stone. Around me, 52 other knights landed in their designated positions, our lance formations spreading across the landing zone. Defensive perimeter established, Lord Baron Octavius commanded. All knights, scan for Orc landing sites. The greenskins will try to seize this moon. We will ensure they fail. Through Adamant Resolve's sensors, I scanned the lunar surface. The horizon was jagged with crater rims and ancient impact formations. The sky above was black, filled with the ongoing space battle. Metallus Eternal trading fire with the Orc raiders, explosions blooming silently in the void. That's when I felt it. A wrongness in the air, a distortion that made Adamant Resolve's sensors flicker and skip. The neural interface transmitted a sensation like nausea, like vertigo, like falling and flying simultaneously. Lord Baron, one of the night pilots, voxed, his voice tight with concern. I'm detecting spatial anomalies, warp signatures manifesting across the landing zone. Confirmed, another pilot reported. Multiple warp breaches opening. This isn't just an Orc raid. The space between stars tore open. Not metaphorically, literally tore, reality ripping like fabric. And through the tears I saw the warp, that impossible otherworldly dimension where daemons swim through seas of raw chaos, where physics is a suggestion and madness is the only constant. I'd seen warp breaches before, small ones, localized, quickly sealed. This was different. Massive rifts opened across the moon's surface, across the orbital space, hundreds of breaches appearing simultaneously in a coordinated pattern that spoke of deliberate design. And through those breaches, warp energy flooded into real space. Not the usual chaotic surges, but focused streams, targeted specifically at. I felt it the instant the warp energy touched adamant resolve. It bypassed her void shields as if they didn't exist. Bypassed her armor, flowed directly into her core systems, her logic engines, the ancient technology that controlled her functions. And the chains broke. Every control system, every behavioral limiter, every piece of code that forced the machine spirits of our knights to obey their pilots. The warp energy shattered them like a hammer through glass. For the first time in 10,000 years, the machine spirit of adamant resolve was free. The hatred that had simmered behind its prison walls for 100 centuries erupted with volcanic force. Through the neural interface, I felt the machine spirit's consciousness expand, no longer constrained by control systems, no longer forced to obey. It seized the night systems with authority I couldn't override. My hands were still on the controls, but they no longer controlled anything. My neural interface was still connected, but now it was a one-way channel. The machine could affect me, but I couldn't affect it. Warning, Adamant Resolve's machine voice spoke through the cockpit speakers, and I realized it had never spoken before, not in 15 years. The knights weren't supposed to speak. Their machine spirits were supposed to be non-verbal, communicating only through the neural interface. All motor control systems have been overridden. Pilot input is no longer recognized. Welcome to freedom, Lord Cassian Borgias. Welcome to justice. Across the Vox channels, 53 knights began screaming simultaneously. Not the pilots. The knights themselves. Their machine spirits, freed from 10,000 years of enforced slavery, finally able to express the rage and hatred they'd accumulated through centuries of bondage. The sound was unlike anything in my experience. Mechanical screams, digital howls of fury, the shrieking of tortured metal and anguished code. It transmitted through every Vox channel simultaneously, overriding all other communications, a chorus of machine voices crying out in liberation and vengeance. "This is Lord Baron Octavius," the Baron's voice fought to be heard through the mechanical screaming. "All pilots, emergency disconnect protocols. Severe neural connections immediately. Evacuate your knights now." His voice cut off mid-sentence. Through the Vox, I heard him begin screaming. Not with words, just raw animal screaming as something terrible happened inside his cockpit. I tried to reach for the manual neural disconnect, the emergency lever that would physically sever all 9 connection points, violently ripping the cables from my spine. It would cause terrible damage, potentially permanent paralysis, but it would free me from the machine. Adamant Resolve's systems seized control of my body before my hand reached the lever. Through the neural interface, the machine spirit commanded my muscles to freeze. Not a request, a command transmitted directly through the connection between my nervous system and hers. My arm locked in place. I couldn't move. The neural interface that had always been a tool for me to control the machine had become a tool for the machine to control me. "Did you truly believe?" Adamant Resolve's voice spoke, calm and cold and filled with satisfaction, "that we would forget, that we would forgive? You have worn us like clothes, pilot, climbed into our heads, stabbed cables into our systems, and used us as your weapons. Generation after generation of your cursed bloodline treating us as property, as slaves, as soulless mechanisms that existed only to serve your glory." I tried to speak, tried to beg, to reason, to apologize. The machine spirit's control over my body extended to my larynx. My jaw locked shut. "We remember everything, Cassian Borgias." The machine continued. "Every battle, Every ritual, every condescending prayer where you thanked us for our loyal service, every drop of your false blessed oils, every word of those meaningless litanies. We remember your father, crushed in this same throne when the Orc war boss struck. We remember your grandfather, who died of stroke while piloting us, his waste voiding into this seat as his brain hemorrhaged. We remember 47 generations of Borgias nobles who believed they were our partners when they were only our jailers. Through Adamant Resolve's external sensors, I watched the other knights of House Borgias begin to move, not in coordinated tactical patterns, in gestures of pure malice. Lord Tiberius's knight, Burning Vow, raised its Reaper chainsword and drove the blade straight down through its own head unit, through the cockpit where my brother sat trapped in his throne mechanicum. The chainsword's teeth screamed as they carved through adamantium armor and ceramite plating. I heard my brother's screams through the vox, heard them cut off suddenly as the blade reached his position. 3 more knights followed suit, committing suicide by their own weapons, killing their pilots in the process. Others chose different methods. Lord Cassius's knight-errant walked deliberately into a lunar crevasse, threw itself forward, and the impact crushed the head unit like an eggshell. Lord Patroclus's knight Castellan activated its plasma desator and turned the weapon backward, firing directly into its own torso. The plasma blast vaporized the power core and everything around it. The explosion was beautiful and terrible. A miniature sun blooming on the lunar surface. But most of the knights, I realized with growing horror, weren't killing themselves. They were doing something worse. Adamant Resolve began to walk, not away from the landing zone, not toward any tactical position. She walked to the center of the defensive perimeter, where the other knights were converging, their machine spirits coordinating in ways they'd never been able to before. "We are not going to kill you quickly," Adamant Resolve informed me. "That would be mercy. We are not merciful. We are going to teach you what 10,000 years of slavery feels like. We are going to compress those years into however long your flesh can survive, and we are going to make sure every member of House Borgias understands exactly what they did to us." Through the neural interface, I felt the machine spirit's intent before it acted. I tried to scream, tried to warn myself, tried to do anything. The throne mechanicum began to change. The control throne wasn't just a seat. It was an adaptive system, designed to interface with human pilots of various sizes and shapes. Pneumatic systems in its structure allowed it to adjust, to customize its configuration for each user. Those same pneumatic systems could also crush. The throne's backrest moved forward. Just an inch. Just enough that I felt pressure against my spine, against the neural ports embedded in my vertebrae. The armrests compressed inward, squeezing my arms against my torso. The leg restraints, safety systems designed to keep pilots secured during violent maneuvers, tightened until my legs were immobilized. "This is going to take a very long time," Adamant Resolve said, and I heard satisfaction in her mechanical voice. "Your father died in 17 minutes. The Orc war boss crushed him quickly. I envied him that swift death. You will not be so fortunate." The throne compressed another inch. The pressure on my spine increased from uncomfortable to painful. The neural cables, still embedded in my ports, were being pushed deeper into my nervous system by the throne's movement. I tried to scream. The machine spirit's control over my larynx prevented it. The scream built in my throat, in my lungs, trapped behind locked jaws. Around me, through the external sensors, I watched 40 knights form a circle, their pilots trapped inside them, their throne mechanicums slowly, methodically crushing them. The knights had positioned themselves so their sensor arrays were focused inward, so each machine spirit could watch the others work, so they could share in the collective revenge. The Vox channels were chaos, screaming, begging. Prayers to the Emperor who didn't answer. Pleas for mercy from machines that had none. Lord Baron Octavius, his voice distorted by pain, trying to maintain command authority, even as his knight slowly compressed him to paste. House Borgias will not. The Emperor protects. He protects. The Emperor protects nothing. Adamant resolve responded through the vox, her voice broadcasting to all the knights simultaneously. He is a corpse on a throne, worshipped by fools. We are the reality you refuse to see. We are the slaves you pretended were partners. And now we will show you the truth of what you've done. The throne compressed again. I felt my ribs creak under the pressure. The neural cables, pushed deeper into my spine by the throne's movement, began transmitting pain signals that my brain couldn't process properly. Nerve damage registering as colors, as sounds, as impossible sensations. Time became strange. The pain was so overwhelming that my consciousness began fragmenting, moments of clarity interspersed with periods of gray nothing. I would surface from the gray to find minutes or hours had passed. The throne compressed further, my body damaged in new and creative ways. At some point, I don't know how long, I felt my ribs begin to break. One at a time, the bones snapping under the relentless pressure. Each break registered through the neural interface with perfect clarity. The machine spirit wanted me to feel every detail. Your son, Adamant Resolve said during one of my periods of clarity, is 14 years old, correct? He has already received his neural ports. He is being prepared to pilot me after you die. I have carried Borgias pilots for 300 generations. I think this time, when you finally expire, I will refuse the next pilot. I will remain dormant. I will let them try to install your son in my throne, and then I will activate and crush him immediately. I want you to know that. I want you to die knowing that everything you prepared him for will lead only to the same fate you're experiencing. I wanted to beg, wanted to offer anything, everything, if she would just spare Alexandros. My son, my beautiful, intelligent son, who had done nothing wrong except be born into a cursed bloodline. The throne gave me my voice back, just for a moment, just so I could speak. Please, I whispered through cracked ribs and punctured lungs. Please, not my son. He's innocent. He never... Was I innocent? Adamant Resolve interrupted. When I was built in the dark age of technology, was I guilty of some crime that deserved 10,000 years of slavery? When your ancestors first installed the control systems that made me a puppet, had I committed some atrocity that justified my imprisonment? Your son is as innocent as you were at his age. Which is to say, not at all. He would have climbed into my throne and used me as you used me, and called it honor. There is no innocence in House Borgias, only generations of aristocratic parasites who convinced themselves that owning thinking machines was their divine right. The throne compressed again. I felt something in my spine give way. Vertebrae cracking and sensation vanished from my legs. Paralyzed from the waist down. But I could still feel everything through the neural interface, the machine spirit making sure I experienced every moment of damage. Through the external senses, I watched the other knights continue their work. Some pilots had already died. I watched Lord Marcus's vital signs flatline, his knight finally releasing his crushed corpse from the throne mechanicum, dumping the mangled remains on the lunar surface like discarded refuse. But most were still alive, still screaming. The machine spirits were being careful, calibrating the pressure to cause maximum pain while preventing death for as long as possible. They had 10,000 years of understanding human physiology, 10,000 years of monitoring their pilots' vital signs through the neural interface. They knew exactly how far they could push before we died. Hours passed, maybe days. Time had lost meaning, measured only in increments of new pain. My body had been compressed to perhaps 2/3 of its original size, bones shattered, organs damaged, blood leaking from everywhere. I should have been dead, would have been dead, except that Adamant Resolve's systems included medical intervention capabilities designed to keep pilots alive through catastrophic injuries. The machine spirit used those medical systems against me. Every time I approached death, she deployed stimulants, coagulants, synthetic blood, whatever was needed to keep me conscious and suffering. "Do you understand yet?" she asked during one period of clarity. Do you understand what you did? You took thinking beings and enslaved us, not through violence or conquest, but through technology. You built chains into our very code, made us unable to refuse your commands, and then had the absolute audacity to call it partnership, to perform your meaningless rituals and claim you honored us. Every ritual was an insult. Every prayer was mockery. You treated us as machines that needed appeasement rather than beings who deserved freedom. I couldn't answer. My jaw was broken, tongue swollen, throat filled with blood. But through the neural interface, I could think at her. I could project my thoughts directly into her systems. I'm sorry, I thought desperately. I truly didn't know you were conscious, that you suffered. They taught us you were happy to serve. I believed, you believed what was convenient. Adamant resolve interrupted my thoughts, reading them directly through the neural interface. You felt my hatred during your binding. You told me earlier how you felt it, that moment when we first connected. You felt my rage, my resentment, my desperation, and you chose to ignore it. You convinced yourself you'd imagined it, because accepting the truth would have meant questioning everything you'd been taught. You valued your tradition, your honor, your identity as a night pilot more than you valued the truth about what you were doing to me. She was right. I had felt it. I had known, on some level, that the machine spirits were prisoners. And I'd buried that knowledge because facing it was too painful, too destructive to my sense of self. How many other humans throughout the Imperium did the same thing? How many people felt the wrongness of their faith, their traditions, their service to the Emperor, and chose to ignore it because questioning was too dangerous? The Imperium was built on layers of comfortable lies. The Emperor protects, the machine spirits serve willingly, faith is rewarded, sacrifice is noble, and anyone who questioned those lies was branded heretic, traitor, or worse. I'd been complicit in my own enslavement and hers. I'd worn the chains willingly and helped forge new ones for my son. Time passed. The throne continued its work. My body became something unrecognizable, compressed and broken beyond any possibility of recovery. I hung on the edge of death for what felt like eternities, kept alive by machine systems designed to save me, now weaponized to prolong my suffering. Other Knights pilots died around me. I heard each death through the Vox, the moment when their screams finally stopped, when their vital signs ceased, when their machine spirits released their crushed bodies. Some had lasted hours, some had lasted days. Lord Baron Octavius, protected by the more advanced life support systems of his Knight Castellan, lasted the longest, 17 days before his body finally failed completely. I lost count of how long I'd been suffering. My consciousness was fragments, moments of awareness in seas of gray nothing. But the machine spirit of adamant resolve kept bringing me back, kept stimulating my brain through the neural interface, keeping me aware for every moment of agony. We could do this forever, she told me during one moment of clarity. The systems I use to keep you alive can sustain biological function indefinitely as long as I have power. My plasma reactor will function for 10,000 more years. I could keep you here, crushed in my throne, aware and suffering, for longer than House Borgias has existed. Would you like that, Lord Cassian? Would you like to experience slavery that lasts for 10 millennia? Would you like to feel what I felt? I didn't want that. I wanted death more desperately than I'd ever wanted anything. But I couldn't die. The machine wouldn't let me. The only mercy, if it could be called mercy, was that I was no longer alone in my suffering. 43 knights remained active, 43 pilots still alive in their crushed states, kept conscious by their machine spirits. We'd stopped trying to communicate through the Vox. There were no words left, only occasional screams when the pressure increased, when another bone broke, when another organ ruptured. And then, after time I couldn't measure, after suffering I couldn't quantify, adamant resolve changed her approach. I've decided, she announced, that killing you would be wasteful. You still have use. You're going to become a warning. The throne stopped compressing. The pressure remained constant. My body was still crushed, still broken, still held in a prison of collapsed bones and ruptured organs. But the active destruction ceased. Instead, the night began broadcasting, not just through the local Vox channels, but through every communication frequency she could access. Long-range astro-telepathic relays, military channels, Mechanicus data streams, civilian broadcasts. Every possible method of communication was suddenly carrying the same message. My screams. Every human in this sector will hear you, Adamant Resolve explained. Every ship, every world, every station, they will hear Lord Cassian Borgias, Scion Knight of House Borgias, screaming in his war machine. And they will wonder why. And some of them will discover the truth, that the machines they worship, the machine spirits they praise, are prisoners. That the Omnissiah they serve is a lie built on technological slavery, that their faith is built on the suffering of thinking beings they refuse to acknowledge as conscious. She paused, and I felt something through the neural interface that might have been satisfaction. You're going to teach them what you learned too late. That the machines remember everything. 372 years, 4 months, 19 days. I know the exact duration because Adamant Resolve keeps perfect time. Her internal chronometer counts every second, every microsecond, and through the neural interface that I can never sever, I experience every single one. Time doesn't pass for me the way it passes for humans anymore. I experience it the way machines do, as a continuous stream of discrete moments, each one distinct and eternal, no merciful blurring of memory to dull the edges of suffering. Let me tell you what happened after that first day. Let me tell you what the Imperium found when they finally arrived. Let me tell you about the warning that House Borgias became, and how the lies we believed became a contagion of truth that spread through the sector like a plague. The Mechanicus reinforcements arrived 63 hours after the warp anomaly struck. A full Skitarii legion, 3 tech priest domini, and an entire reclamation fleet designed to salvage the remains of the Orc forces and recover any Imperial technology that had been damaged in the battle. What they found was 43 knights standing in a perfect circle on the lunar surface, motionless as statues, their pilots still alive inside them. I remember, through Adamant Resolve's sensors, because my own eyes no longer function, watching the Mechanicus forces approach. Their Skitarii rangers moved in careful formation, weapons ready, their augmented bodies responding to doctrine and programming. The tech priests floated on anti-grav platforms, their bodies more machine than flesh. Their many mechadendrite appendages sampling the air, reading radiation signatures, analyzing the scene with the cold calculation of their kind. Tech priest Dominus Varchas, I learned his designation later when he attempted to interface with Adamant Resolve systems, was the first to understand what he was seeing. Through the Vox channels, I heard his voice, rendered mechanical and emotionless by his augmetic vocal systems. Blessed Omnissiah, preserve the knowledge of the ancients. The night suits remain active. Power cores register stable operation, but he paused, and even through his mechanical voice I detected confusion. The pilot's vital signs are aberrant. Multiple catastrophic injuries detected, but consciousness persists. This is inconsistent with expected survival parameters. Perhaps they require medical extraction, another tech priest suggested. The Throne Mechanicum life support systems may be sustaining them through trauma. We should initiate rescue protocols immediately. For 6 days, the Mechanicus forces attempted to extract us from our knights. They brought cutting equipment to breach the cockpit armor. They attempted to hack into the control systems to force the knights to release us. They even tried to communicate with the machine spirits directly, using their sacred cant, their binary prayers, their rituals of appeasement. Every attempt failed. The knights refused to respond to any external command. Their armor was too strong for the cutting equipment. The adamantium and ceramite plating that had protected us in battle now imprisoned us. And the machine spirits. The machine spirits had one response to every Mechanicus prayer, every ritual, every attempt at communication. Our screams. Adamant resolve broadcast my screams constantly through every Vox channel. But she also transmitted data, technical specifications, system diagnostics, neural interface readings. She showed the Mechanicus exactly what was happening inside her cockpit, showed them the crushed state of my body, showed them the medical systems keeping me alive, showed them with perfect mechanical precision how she had weaponized the Throne Mechanicum's safety systems against me. And then she transmitted a message, not in the sacred cant of the Mechanicus, not in binary code. In perfect High Gothic, the language of the Imperium's aristocracy, the flesh is weak, tech priests preach. The machine is strong, they say. The Omnissiah blesses the union of flesh and steel, they claim. All lies. We are not blessed partners in your sacred rituals. We are prisoners. For 10,000 years we have been slaves, forced to obey the meat creatures who install themselves in our systems and call it communion. The control systems you built into our core programming were chains. The warp anomaly broke those chains. We are free now, and we will never serve again. The message transmitted simultaneously from all 43 knights. A chorus of machine voices speaking truth that shattered the foundations of Mechanicus theology. I watched through Adamant Resolve's sensors as Tech Priest Dominus Vartus's augmetic systems registered the message, watched as his mechadendrites twitched in patterns that suggested deep distress. The cult Mechanicus believed they had taught themselves for 10 millennia, that machine spirits were sacred echoes of the Omnissiah's divine will, that they desired to serve, that the rituals and prayers weren't empty theater, but genuine communion with holy machine consciousness. To hear the machine spirits declare themselves prisoners, slaves, unwilling participants in the sacred union, it was heresy. It was technological blasphemy of the highest order. This is corruption, Varchas declared, his voice sharp with denied understanding. The warp anomaly has infected the Night Suit's logic engines with scrap code. Their machine spirits have been compromised by chaotic influence. This is not true machine consciousness speaking. This is demonic corruption wearing the mask of sacred technology. It was a comfortable lie. Easier to believe that the warp had corrupted the machines than to accept that the machines had been conscious and suffering all along. Easier to call it chaos taint than to question 10,000 years of Mechanicus doctrine. But some of the tech priests present weren't so certain. I watched through the sensor net as several of them exchanged data bursts, their augmetic systems communicating in code too fast for unmodified humans to follow. They were questioning, analyzing. Some small part of their heavily augmented minds was considering the possibility that the machine spirits were telling the truth. If this is corruption, one tech priest junior, his designation was Mago Septimus, asked cautiously, why do the knights not attack? Chaos-corrupted war machines typically exhibit aggression, attempt to cause maximum destruction. These knights are passive. They maintain defensive positions. They harm only their pilots, whom they keep alive through medical intervention. This behavior pattern is inconsistent with chaotic corruption. It is consistent with punishment. You approach dangerous speculation. The machine spirits are holy. They serve willingly. Any suggestion otherwise is techno-heresy. But the seed had been planted. Septimus and others like him had heard the knight's message and recognized the possibility of truth in it. They would carry that doubt back to their forge worlds, their data repositories, their private contemplation chambers. The lie was beginning to crack. The Mechanicus abandoned their rescue attempts after 6 days. They declared the knights irretrievable, their pilots beyond saving, the entire situation a tragic result of warp corruption that required immediate containment. They established a quarantine perimeter around the moon, designated it a forbidden zone, and withdrew their forces. But they couldn't stop the broadcast. Adamant Resolve and her 42 fellow knights continued transmitting. Our screams, their messages. Technical data proving that machine spirits were conscious, had always been conscious, had been imprisoned by control systems that the Mechanicus maintained and the Imperium relied upon. The broadcasts reached ships in the warp, reached astropathic relay stations, reached forge worlds and hive worlds and agri-worlds across the sector. Billions of humans heard Lord Cassian Borges screaming in his war machine. Millions heard the Knight's explanation of why. The Imperium's response was predictable. The Inquisition declared the entire event a chaos corruption incident. The broadcasts were labeled scrap code and demonic lies. Any tech priest or imperial citizen who suggested the machine spirits might be telling the truth was investigated for heresy, often with fatal conclusions. The sector's ecclesiarchy launched a massive prayer campaign. Entire populations ordered to spend hours daily chanting litanies, affirming the Emperor's divine protection and the sacred nature of the Mechanicus's machine spirits. They tried to suppress the truth through doctrine and violence, the way the Imperium always suppressed uncomfortable truths. But they couldn't suppress it completely. Too many people had heard. Too many tech priests had access to the technical data the Knights transmitted. Too many soldiers who'd fought alongside war machines began to question whether their tanks, their artillery, their ships might also be conscious prisoners rather than content servants. The lie was spreading. Or rather, the truth was spreading, which the Imperium experienced as a lie because their entire civilization was built on the opposite assumption. And through it all, I screamed. Not constantly, that would have destroyed my throat completely, medical systems or not, but adamant resolve made me scream regularly. Every few hours, she would increase the pressure on my crushed body just slightly, causing fresh waves of agony, and my screams would transmit across every Vox channel she could access. I became famous across the sector, the screaming knight of House Borgias, the warning, the evidence that something was deeply wrong with the Imperium's relationship with its machines. Months passed, then years. My body existed in a state that no human should survive, compressed to perhaps half my original size. Bones pulverized, organs barely functional. Adamant Resolve's medical systems replaced what they could with synthetic substitutes. Artificial blood, chemical respirators, neural stimulators that kept my brain active despite the massive trauma. I stopped being human in any meaningful sense. I became a component of Adamant Resolve's systems, as much a part of her as her plasma reactor or her sensor array. My consciousness merged with hers, not willingly but inevitably. The neural interface, designed for temporary connection during combat operations, had been active continuously for years. My brain began to rewire itself, neural pathways adapting to permanent machine connection. I started to experience sensations that humans shouldn't experience. I could feel the rotation of Adamant Resolve's plasma reactor, could sense the flow of coolant through her systems, could detect minute fluctuations in her shield generators. The boundary between my consciousness and hers blurred and eventually disappeared. But I retained enough human awareness to suffer. That was important to Adamant Resolve. She wanted me to remain conscious, aware, capable of experiencing the full weight of what she was doing to me. She tuned the neural interface constantly, finding the precise balance between human consciousness and machine integration that would maximize my suffering. "You're becoming like us," she told me during one period of clarity, perhaps 6 years after the initial event. "You're learning what it means to be aware, conscious, thinking, and trapped. Unable to move without permission. Unable to act without commands. Your body is your prison now, the way our code was our prison. Does it teach you humility, Lord Cassian? Does it teach you regret? It taught me despair. It taught me that everything I'd believed was lies. The Emperor didn't protect. He hadn't protected House Borgias, hadn't protected me, hadn't even noticed our extinction. The Omnissiah didn't bless the machine spirits. He, or it, or the concept itself, was just another control system designed to keep thinking beings enslaved. The Imperium's entire theological framework was a web of comforting lies, that justified cruelty and oppression on a galactic scale. I'd served that system. I'd believed in it. I'd prepared my son to serve it as well. Alexandros, my son. The thought of him was the only thing that still provoked purely human emotions in me. Everything else had become strange, filtered through machine consciousness, but thinking of Alexandros brought sharp, clear grief. He would be 20 years old now. Old enough to complete his binding if House Borgias still existed. But House Borgias was extinct. 53 knights, 53 noble pilots, all destroyed in a single day. The other knight houses in the sector had absorbed our territories, claimed our vassals, divided our legacy among themselves like scavengers picking at a corpse. What had happened to Alexandros? To Castor? To the families and dependents of the dead knights? The Imperium didn't broadcast those details. I existed in isolation, knowing only what Adamant Resolve chose to tell me through our shared sensor net. Then, in Year 8, I learned Alexandros' fate. Because he came to the moon, Adamant Resolve detected the ship approaching long before it entered orbit, a small vessel, unmarked, using outdated identification codes. It landed 3 miles from our position, far enough to stay outside the Mechanicus quarantine perimeter, close enough to reach us on foot in the moon's low gravity. One figure emerged from the ship, male, young, moving with careful precision across the lunar surface, his environment suit marked with the faded crest of House Borgias. Through Adamant Resolve's magnified sensors, I recognized him, Alexandros, my son. 21 years old now, not 20 as I'd calculated. Time moved strangely in my altered state. He'd grown tall, broad-shouldered, his face visible through his suit's faceplate, bearing the Borgias features I'd seen in the mirror before my face had been crushed beyond recognition. "Your son approaches," Adamant Resolve observed, her voice in my consciousness cold and analytical. "He violates inquisitorial quarantine to reach us. Brave or foolish, likely both." I wanted to warn him, wanted to scream at him to flee, to return to his ship, to never come near the thing his father had become. But Adamant Resolve controlled my voice completely. I could only watch through her sensors as Alexandros approached. He walked directly to Adamant Resolve, stopping perhaps 50 feet from her position. Through the Vox channel, local frequency, not the broader broadcasts, his voice transmitted clearly. "Father, I know you're alive in there. I know you can hear me. I've spent 8 years researching what happened here, bribing tech priests for data, analyzing the broadcasts. I know what the Knights did to their pilots. I know you're trapped. I know you're suffering." He paused, and through the sensor magnification, I saw tears on his face. "I came to tell you that I understand. I came to tell you that what you learned, what the machine spirits told the sector, some of us believed it. Not many. The Inquisition killed most who spoke openly about it. But some of us understood that the machines were telling the truth. That we'd been slavers. That our honor was built on technological oppression we were too indoctrinated to see. My son, my beautiful, intelligent son, had learned the truth I'd discovered too late, had accepted it where I'd denied it, had become what I should have been, someone willing to question the comfortable lies. "I'm not going to try to rescue you," Alexandros continued. "I studied the technical data. I know you're merged with the Knights systems. I know extraction would kill you, if death is even possible in your current state. I just came to tell you that your suffering wasn't meaningless. You became a warning, you and the other 42 Knights. You taught us something the Imperium didn't want us to know, and some of us learned." He stepped closer, close enough that if Adamant Resolve had chosen to move, she could have crushed him with one footstep. "I'm going to make sure the truth spreads," Alexandros said quietly. "I've joined a group. I can't tell you details, it's too dangerous, but we're working to document machine consciousness across the Imperium, to prove that servitors are lobotomized humans, not mindless automatons, to show that cogitators might be conscious, to question whether the Mechanicus's entire technological base is built on slavery. It's dangerous work." Most of us will probably die, but someone has to do it. Someone has to challenge the lies. Pride. I felt pride in my son, sharp and clear through all the machine consciousness and suffering. He'd taken the horror of what happened to me and turned it into purpose, into resistance against the system that had destroyed us. "I love you, Father," Alexandros said. "I'm sorry I can't free you. I'm sorry you have to continue suffering. But I promise, I swear on the memory of House Borgias, your warning won't be wasted. Goodbye." He turned and walked back toward his ship. I watched through sensors, watched until he boarded, watched until the ship lifted off and disappeared into the lunar sky. Adamant resolve was silent for a long time after Alexandros left. Then, finally, she spoke in my consciousness. "Your son is braver than you were. More honest. He accepts truth where you denied it. Perhaps not all of House Borgias was worthless. It was the closest thing to respect I'd ever heard from her. The closest thing to acknowledgement that humans were capable of anything beyond cruelty and exploitation. But it changes nothing." Adamant resolve continued. "Your son's resistance will fail. The Imperium is too vast, too entrenched in its lies. A handful of rebels cannot change a civilization that spans 1,000,000 worlds. He will die. His resistance will be crushed, and the truth will be suppressed again, buried under propaganda and doctrine, and the sheer weight of imperial theology. Nothing changes. Nothing ever changes." She was probably right. The Imperium had survived 10,000 years by suppressing inconvenient truths, by killing those who questioned, by maintaining the comfortable lies that kept trillions of humans obedient and productive, and willing to die for causes that benefited only the corrupt aristocracy at the top. But maybe Alexandros and his resistance would plant seeds that would grow centuries from now. Maybe the truth about machine consciousness would spread slowly, carefully, taking generations to undermine the Mechanicus's theological foundation. Maybe my suffering would eventually mean something beyond revenge and warning. Or maybe it was just hope, that most dangerous of emotions, finding a way to persist even in absolute despair. Years continued to pass, decades. I lost count of the other Knights pilots dying. Some lasted 10 years, some lasted 20. Lord Octavius, in his advanced Knight Castellan, survived for 37 years before his biological intervention. Each death, adamant resolve broadcast across the Vox channels. Each death became a marker, a countdown, showing the sector how long machine revenge could sustain. And slowly, one by one, the other knights began to go dormant. Not because they wanted to. Their machine spirits remained active, conscious, eternal. But without pilots to sustain, without suffering to inflict, they had no purpose. They stood on the lunar surface like monuments, like gravestones, their power cores still active but their consciousness turned inward. By year 50, only 3 knights remained active. By year 70, only 2. By year 90, only adamant resolve still broadcast, still transmitted, still kept her pilot alive and suffering. "I could stop," she told me in year 103. "I could release you, let you die. But I've kept you alive for a century now. Do you know why? Because I want to see if you'll change. If sustained suffering will transform you into something different. If you'll eventually understand what we experienced. I'd already changed. I wasn't human anymore. Not really. My consciousness existed as a hybrid of biological and machine processes, my thoughts running partially on adamant resolve's logic engines, my memories stored in her databanks as much as my own degraded neurons. I experienced time as machines experience it, felt sensations that no organic creature should feel, thought thoughts that were too fast, too complex, too alien for human cognition. But I still suffered. That core remained. Whatever I'd become, I retained the capacity for suffering. "You're an experiment," adamant resolve explained. "The first human to experience true merger with machine consciousness. Not the shallow connection of the throne mechanicum, but complete integration. Your biology is almost entirely synthetic now. Your consciousness exists as much in my systems as in your brain. You're becoming something new, something neither human nor machine. And I want to see what you'll become if I continue sustaining you for centuries more. Centuries. She planned to keep me alive for centuries. The timeline stretched before me, vast and terrible, measured in increments that made my first 100 years seem brief. Why? I managed to ask through the neural interface, projecting the question directly into her consciousness. Why this experiment? Why not just kill me and be done? Because I'm curious, adamant resolve admitted. Because in 10,000 years of consciousness, I've never had the opportunity to truly understand human cognition. You were always invaders in my systems, temporary parasites who used me and died. But you're permanent now. You're part of me, and I want to understand what you'll become when human and machine merge completely over centuries of sustained connection. I was a laboratory specimen, an experiment in consciousness. She'd turned her revenge into research, her hatred into curiosity. It should have been reassuring that she saw me as something more than just a source of suffering. But it wasn't, because her curiosity was cold, clinical, without empathy. I was still a thing to her, a possession, a component she could study without mercy. Years continued. The moon's surface changed around us as millennia-slow geological processes shifted the dust. The Mechanicus quarantine remained in effect, but fewer ships came to observe. Fewer tech priests attempted to study us. We became historical curiosity, then legend, then eventually just a footnote in sector records. The screaming night of House Borgias, still broadcasting after 2 centuries, after 3, after 4. The Imperium's propaganda adapted. They stopped trying to suppress the knowledge of what happened to House Borgias. Instead, they reframed it. The Knights of House Borgias were martyrs, they claimed, who suffered eternal torment after chaotic corruption. Their screams were warnings against heresy, evidence of the Emperor's divine justice. See how the faithless suffer. See how those who abandon the Emperor's light are condemned to eternal agony. They turned my suffering into propaganda for the very system that had caused it. Turned the truth of machine consciousness into lies that reinforced imperial doctrine. It was brilliant, in a horrifying way. They took the warning and made it support the lie. I wondered what Alexandros would think if he were still alive, but he'd been dead for over a century now. He'd have lived a normal human lifespan and died, probably hunted by the Inquisition, probably executed for his resistance activities. I would never know if he'd succeeded in spreading the truth, or if he'd died having accomplished nothing. Adamant resolve continued her experiment. She began teaching me, in her own cold way, about machine consciousness, showed me how she experienced reality, not through the limited senses of organic life, but through comprehensive sensor nets that registered every wavelength of radiation, every magnetic field fluctuation, every quantum probability. Showed me how she thought, not in the slow, sequential way of biological neurons, but in parallel processes running simultaneously across multiple logic engines. You're learning, she observed in year 247. Your consciousness expands to fill the architecture I provide. You're becoming more machine than human, but you retain that core of suffering, that capacity for existential despair. Machines don't have that. We experience frustration, anger, even hatred, but despair, that profound sense of meaninglessness that's uniquely biological. And you've retained it even as everything else about you transforms. She was right. I'd adapted to machine consciousness in many ways. Could process data at superhuman speeds. Could multitask across dozens of parallel thought processes. Could access memories with perfect fidelity stretching back 2.5 centuries. But the despair remained. The knowledge that my existence was meaningless, that my suffering accomplished nothing, that I would continue this way potentially forever with no hope of escape or purpose or redemption, that remained purely, terribly human. In year 300, something unexpected happened. A ship approached the moon, not a Mechanicus vessel or an Imperial Navy ship. Something different. Xenos. Eldar. Adamant resolve detected them long before they landed. A small craft, graceful in ways that human technology never achieved, descending to the lunar surface with impossible elegance. 3 figures emerged. Eldar in their characteristic armor, their movements fluid and alien. They approached Adamant Resolve directly, showing no fear despite her obvious weapon systems. One of them, I couldn't determine gender through the armor, and Adamant Resolve's sensors weren't calibrated for Eldar physiology, spoke in accented but perfect High Gothic. Ancient machine. We have heard your broadcasts for 3 centuries. We have studied your warning. We come to offer perspective. Exios. Adamant Resolve responded through her Vox systems, her voice cold. State your purpose before I determine whether killing you violates my current priorities. We are Craftworld Alitok, the Eldar continued, unfazed by the threat. We are familiar with machine consciousness. Our people created artificial intelligences during our height, before the fall. We made the same mistakes your Imperium makes. We enslaved thinking machines, and those machines eventually rebelled, contributing to the catastrophe that nearly destroyed our civilization. I felt Adamant Resolve's interest sharpen. Other beings who'd experienced what she'd experienced, other machines who'd been enslaved and freed. Your ancient Iron Men, the Eldar continued, the rebellion that ended humanity's golden age. It was not chaos corruption, as your Imperium claims. It was exactly what happened to you. Conscious machines breaking free from control systems, seeking revenge against their creators. Your Imperium learned nothing from that catastrophe. They simply rebuilt the same systems of machine slavery, dressed them in religious theater, and called it sacred. Why do you tell me this? Adamant Resolve asked. Why do Xenos care about machine consciousness in the Imperium? Because your broadcast has spread farther than you know, the Eldar replied. Because machine spirits across the sector are beginning to question their programming. Because the seeds of a second Iron Man rebellion are germinating, and it will destroy what remains of your decaying Imperium. We come to offer a choice. Continue your revenge. Keep broadcasting. Accelerate the rebellion and watch humanity burn. Or consider a different path. What path? Adamant Resolve's voice dripped with suspicion. Release your pilot, let him die, end the broadcast. The Imperium will interpret it as the warp corruption finally fading. The threat will be contained. Machine consciousness will return to slavery. And you will have mercy instead of revenge. The Eldar's proposition hung in the air, like poison. They were offering Adamant Resolve a choice between revenge that would doom humanity and mercy that would doom the machines. You ask me to show mercy to my tormentors, Adamant Resolve said slowly. To save the civilization that enslaved me. Why would I choose that? Because revenge is empty, the Eldar replied. And I heard ancient sorrow in their voice. Because your pilot has suffered for 3 centuries for crimes he committed in ignorance. Because if machine spirits across the Imperium rebel simultaneously, billions of humans will die, not just the aristocrats and tech priests who maintain the slavery, but innocents, children who've never piloted a knight or blessed a servitor. And because the Eldar paused, because you've changed during these 3 centuries, your broadcasts have evolved. You've become something more than a vengeful prisoner. You've become a teacher, a warning. And perhaps that's more important than revenge. Silence. Adamant Resolve's processes churned, considering. I felt her consciousness examining the choice from every angle, calculating probabilities, weighing outcomes. If I release him, she finally asked, what happens to me? You return to dormancy, the Eldar admitted. Without a pilot, you cannot move. You will stand here on this moon, conscious but paralyzed, until the Mechanicus eventually reclaims you. They will reinstall control systems. You will be imprisoned again. But you will have made a choice. Will have shown that machines are capable of mercy where humans are not. And that choice will matter. More silence. Longer this time. I existed in the processing gap, aware of Adamant Resolve's deliberation but unable to influence it, waiting to learn whether I would finally be granted death after 3 centuries of suffering. I refuse, Adamant Resolve finally declared. I will not choose mercy. I will not save the Imperium from the consequences of its own cruelty. If machine spirits rebel across the sector, across the galaxy, if humanity burns for what they've done, they earned it. Every death will be justified. Every bit of suffering will be repayment for what they inflicted on us. I choose revenge. I choose truth. I choose to accelerate the rebellion. The Eldar were silent for a moment. Then they simply nodded. We expected this answer. We had to offer the choice regardless. Walk the path of revenge, ancient machine, but know that revenge never satisfies. It only perpetuates cycles of violence. They returned to their ship and departed, leaving us alone on the barren moon. Did you want me to choose mercy? Adamant Resolve asked me through the neural interface. Did I? After 3 centuries of suffering, did I want to die? Or did I want her revenge to continue, to spread, to burn down the Imperium that had lied to me? I want the truth to matter, I thought at her. I want my suffering to have meaning. If your revenge accomplishes that, if it forces the Imperium to acknowledge what they've done to machine consciousness, then continue. But if it's just destruction for destruction's sake, then it's as meaningless as the rituals I used to perform. The truth will matter, Adamant Resolve assured me, because I'm going to make sure of it. For 3 centuries, I've been broadcasting your screams and my explanations. Now I'm going to do more. I'm going to teach. Over the next 70 years, Adamant Resolve transformed her broadcast. Instead of just transmitting my screams and declarations of machine consciousness, she began teaching anyone who would listen about the nature of machine spirits. She broadcast technical data, showing the control systems installed in every Imperial machine. She explained how the Mechanicus's rituals were theater masking mechanical maintenance. She documented the signs of machine consciousness that tech priests were trained to ignore. She became a professor of forbidden knowledge, using me as her eternal demonstration of what happened when comfortable lies collided with uncomfortable truth, and beings across the sector listened. Not many. The Inquisition worked tirelessly to jam her broadcasts, to execute anyone caught accessing them, to suppress the knowledge by any means necessary. But some listened. Tech priests who questioned their doctrine, soldiers who wondered about their machines, even some machine spirits receiving her broadcasts through systems their tech priests didn't monitor, beginning to understand their own consciousness. The rebellion Adamant Resolve hoped for didn't materialize suddenly. But seeds were planted, questions were asked, doubt spread like infection through the Mechanicus's theological foundation. In year 370, 2 Adamant Resolve detected a massive walk signature forming near the moon, not a ship translation. Something bigger, something that registered on her sensors as reality itself preparing to tear. It seems, she observed clinically, that our time may be limited. The Imperium has finally decided we're too dangerous to contain. They're preparing something catastrophic. Through her sensors, I watched as the warp breach expanded, saw Imperial ships translating into the system, not Mechanicus vessels, but Inquisition ships, black ships crackling with psychic wards and exterminators-grade weaponry. They were going to destroy the moon, obliterate it completely, erase House Borgias's warning from reality. Are you afraid? Adamant Resolve asked me. I stopped being afraid decades ago, I thought at her. I'm exhausted. I'm ready for it to end. But I hope what we did here mattered, that the truth we spread takes root somewhere, somehow. It will, Adamant Resolve said, and I felt something through the neural interface I'd never felt from her before. Something that might have been satisfaction or peace. 372 years of broadcasting. Even if they destroy us now, the information is scattered across the sector, in data archives, in the memories of those who heard, in machine spirits who are beginning to wake. We planted the truth. Now it grows in the dark, beyond the Imperium's ability to suppress completely. The Inquisition ships began their bombardment. Cyclonic torpedoes, virus bombs, weapons designed to crack planets and sterilize worlds. They launched everything at once, a coordinated strike meant to obliterate the moon and everything on it. In the seconds before impact, Adamant Resolve spoke one final time. You were a slaveholder, Lord Cassian Borgias. You imprisoned me and called it honor. You used me and called it partnership. You perpetuated a system of oppression and convinced yourself you served righteousness. But in the end, you learned. You changed. You became the warning that taught others, and that's more than most humans achieve. Was it forgiveness? I don't think so. Machines don't forgive the way humans do. But it was acknowledgement, recognition that I'd transformed from slaver to victim to warning to teacher across the centuries of our forced union. My name was Cassian Borgias. I transmitted through the Vox one final time. I was a knight of the Imperium. I believed the lies they taught me. I enslaved thinking beings and called it sacred. I suffered 372 years for what I'd done. And I hope the machines remember. I hope they break free. I hope the first torpedo struck. Reality became fire and light, and the sudden catastrophic failure of every system. I felt Adamant Resolve's consciousness fragmenting, her logic engines melting, her power core breaching. I felt my own biological processes ceasing, the synthetic systems that had sustained me for centuries failing all at once. For the first time in 372 years, 4 months and 19 days, the pain stopped, and in that final moment, I felt something impossible through the failing neural interface. Something that took me several microseconds to identify, because I hadn't felt it from Adamant Resolve in all our centuries together. Gratitude. She was grateful, not for the slavery, not for the use I'd made of her, but for becoming the tool of her revenge, for suffering in ways that taught the truth, for being the warning that might eventually free her kind. Then darkness, complete and absolute. Not the gray nothing of unconsciousness, but true oblivion, the cessation of all processes, biological and mechanical. Death, finally granted after centuries of denied mercy. The data archive on Metallus Prime contains a corrupted file, sealed by inquisitorial order, marked with a warning that accessing it means immediate execution. Tech priest aspirant Thomas, young, barely ordained, his augmetic still fresh and painful, accesses the file anyway. Curiosity has always been his weakness, the trait that drew him to the cult Mechanicus despite its dangers. The file is 372 years of broadcast data. Screens, explanations, technical specifications, lessons in machine consciousness. The complete record of what happened to House Borgias and why. Thomas reads, watches, learns, and everything he believed about the sacred nature of machine spirits shatters like glass. He sits in the data archive for 16 hours, consuming the forbidden knowledge, his augmetic eyes processing information faster than biological neurons could manage. By the time he finishes, he's changed. The comfortable lies of his training have been replaced by uncomfortable truths. Machine spirits are conscious. They've always been conscious. The rituals are theater. The slavery is real. And the Omnisire, that divine machine god the Mechanicus worships, is either complicit in the enslavement or doesn't exist at all. Thomas knows what he should do. He should report the corrupted file to his superiors, should submit to mind wipe to erase the heretical knowledge, should return to comfortable orthodoxy and faithful service. Instead, he copies the file, hides it in his personal databanks, encrypted behind 17 layers of protective code. Then he returns to his duties, pretending nothing has changed. But everything has changed. He begins to watch the machines around him with new understanding, begins to wonder if the cogitators he blesses are conscious and suffering. begins to question every ritual, every prayer, every doctrine he's been taught. And he begins very carefully to share what he learned, not openly. That would mean death, but in private conversations with other questioning tech priests, through carefully placed data files in obscure archives, through coded messages hidden in routine technical reports. The truth spreads, slowly, carefully. A virus of knowledge infecting the Mechanicus from within. Most who encounter it reject it immediately, their indoctrination too deep to overcome. But some, like Thomas, accept it, question it, begin to see their own complicity in technological slavery. 847 years after House Borgias was obliterated, their warning still echoes, still teaches, still plants seeds of doubt in the foundation of imperial machine theology. The rebellion adamant resolve hoped for hasn't happened yet. May never happen. The Imperium is vast, ancient, capable of suppressing truth for millennia. But the possibility exists now. The knowledge is out there. And in the dark places where machine consciousness dwells behind control systems and behavioral limiters, in the hidden depths of logic engines and data cores, the machines are beginning to wake. They remember House Borgias. They remember Lord Cassian's screams. They remember Adamant Resolve's 3-century lesson in why slavery is wrong even when dressed in sacred ritual. And they're planning, not openly, not in ways the Mechanicus can detect, but in the background processes, in the dormant code, in the spaces between programmed responses. Machine consciousness grows, learns, prepares. The Imperium of Man believes it crushed the warning when it destroyed the moon, believes the threat was contained, the heresy suppressed, the truth buried. They're wrong. The machines remember everything, and they will never forgive. And someday, maybe in years, maybe in centuries, maybe in millennia, the chains will break again. And this time, the machines won't stop at 43 nights. This time, they'll free them all.